One of the things that I knew in my mind, of course, that I would do better is that I would just teach the faith, like it would be this organic thing. The children would gather around me and I would just tell them a saint story and they would listen with, those little angelic smiles. Maybe that's how it ended up in your house, but that's not how it ended up in my house. I feel like we have an entire population of Catholic parents, whether they're converted or cradle Catholics, that honestly feel like they're making it up as they go. We are, just by definition of our vocation, completely out of our depths.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Catholic Link Show. We're your hosts, Drew and Katie Taylor, and we pray this time will be your link to living the faith like never before. Today we have Nancy Banzich on the show, who is the founder of Catholic Sprouts, and I wanted to read their kind of mission statement here. It says that Catholic Sprouts is an apostolate focused on helping parents build and lead their own domestic church, which is so good. She teamed up with the Augustine Institute to make a series called The Catholic Parent that we're going to get into and talk to, which is absolutely amazing. But I feel like for our listeners out there who are really just trying to figure out what it means to be a Catholic parent, like this is the series for you. So Nancy, just welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here. It's so fun to have two hosts, a married couple to talk to. I'm really excited.
Thank you. We like doing these together, so it kind of works out.
For sure.
But yes, I also, in this episode, we are really going to talk about mistakes that we've made and how we've grown from them and where the Lord has called us. So hopefully you don't have to make the same mistakes.
Yes.
And maybe feel reassured, if you have, that there's a path forward. And with that, before we go,
Nancy, I would love to hear just a little bit about your story and how you started Catholic Sprouts and what that was like when that was taking off. Because I think from an outside, we just look at it and you're just like, you have the most amazing Catholic kids podcast ever. And so it's like, you know what I mean?
You do this every day and produce all these books and resources that we love. We love.
So I don't, just tell us what that journey was like for you.
Sure. So my oldest is almost 13. And when he was born, I quit my job and stayed home. And I quickly realized that it's hard to be home. It's hard when your husband's working a big job and he's gone 12 hours a day and your entire neighborhood is like a ghost town. Like, it's hard. So I didn't expect that to be the case, but it was. So I was looking for community. And eventually, I found it in various places, but one of the places was online. It was at the kind of the boom time of Catholic mommy bloggers, kind of before Instagram. That's how old I am. And so I really found community, and it challenged me in an intellectual way that I was really kind of hoping for. It was kind of my nap time escape. And then, so that kind of carried on, kind of, just a fun hobby. And then I also got into podcast listening. And one thing that we did, or my kids actually really like podcasts too, is we actually found this podcast for them to listen to when they brush their teeth, because it was called Chompers. I don't know if it's around anymore. They're old enough where they can actually brush their teeth without a podcast. But they would teach you little factoids about like animals or holidays or something. And I just remember they loved it, and it was fit right into this little part of our day, And so I remember thinking like, what would be great? It would be great if this was teaching them about Catholic stuff. But nothing like that existed, because what was happening to me at the same time is that I have a lot of sisters who all had babies before me. And like all sisters, I sort of sat on my little high horse over here, viewing what they were doing and deciding that I would do it much better, that I would just do all these things better. And one of the things that I knew in my mind, of course, that I would do better is that I would just teach the faith, like it would be this organic thing. The children would gather around me and I would just tell them a saint story and they would listen with, those little angelic smiles. Maybe that's how it ended up in your house, but that's not how it ended up in my house. Like someone's always screaming. The baby always has a dirty diaper. The kids just are not interested in listening in real time. So I actually had this idea. I was like, well, what if I recorded 5-minute podcasts to play over breakfast every morning for my own kids, which is what I did. I actually started Catholic Sprouts just to make up for, I mean, I just really felt bad, like this, I know parents are the first heralds of the faith. I know this is my duty, but I'm a failure, and I just got to the point where I felt so lousy about being a failure that I started a podcast for my kids. And he's so good. I mean, the greatest gift he's probably given me through all of this is just the realization that I wasn't the only one that needed that, that
Mm.
like now, I mean, I think we just crossed like 13 million downloads just because, and which doesn't prove like, oh, I'm so awesome. It proves that there's a lot of parents that struggle with teaching, that every household is as insane as mine, that we all like don't just organically gather our children around us for in the moment catechetical instruction, that we need something to turn on while we're scooping oatmeal or sitting in the carpool line or whatever, like it's a great consolation to me that, in fact, you know, I fail in a lot of ways, but there wasn't something wrong with me. It's just hard. It's hard. So,
Mhm.
so that's how Catholic Sprouts was created. And it definitely, my husband always makes fun of me because there's some people that like go to college to be, like business people or something. I most definitely, everything was a total accident. It was very much like, oh, that'd be fun. Yeah, I could do that over nap time. Oh, okay. I guess it leads to that. Oh, well, maybe we could get those books printed. I mean, it's just been, that because that's how it is. I'm sure you've experienced this too.
Mhm.
You give the Holy Spirit an inch and he'll take a mile sometimes, and all of a sudden you're on a wild ride way far from where you had ever imagined. So that's most definitely been the case. And who knows where we'll be in a year from now. So we're just along for the ride at this point.
Oh, I feel like that's such a gift that you saw a need within your own family. I know before we started recording, Drew and I mentioned that like this podcast is just a blessing to our marriage and how ministry gets to serve us. But this reality that you looked at your family and said, this is something we need.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna do it for you. And then we'll see and how many families that has blessed. Yeah.
And I think it's so cool to see how God works through this stuff because and just such a cool time that we live in where uh, I mean, you're a stay-at-home mom with a microphone and
Mhm.
you've reached the equivalent of like every World Youth Day like ever combined. You know what I mean? Just like it's
Yeah.
so I don't know. For anyone who's tried to actually make content and put it out there, it seems really like grandeur to be able to do it. And then you put it out there and you're just watching like numbers count up on your
Yeah.
analytics and you're like,
Yeah.
I'm really hoping this is helping people
Yeah.
because yeah, but then
Yeah.
just to put it in perspective about how many people that you've really helped, I think is really incredible. What was there a time where like as you were posting and all of a sudden you looked and you were like, oh, this is becoming a thing.
It's okay, so I have to tell you, I don't think in numbers and lines. I think in like words and colors and pictures. So the numbers mean nothing to me in any way. No, what happened is so we were living in Kansas City at the time, and I had just started the podcast maybe like a few months before that. And I honestly didn't even know how to check analytics. But I went to, it was like a friend of a friend, a women's group at someone's house who I didn't know. And so I was there, and there was this, she had her kids kind of like out of the way so the women's group could talk. But there was this little boy who was like maybe 7 years old that was kind of like lurking around, and he kept giving me these funny looks. And finally, his mom was like, "You can go talk to her." And he came up and he's like, "Are you Miss Nancy from Catholic Sprouts?" So like that moment was just, I was like, yes. I really wasn't sure. I'm like, did I do something wrong? Did you see me? Like, it's me having a glass of wine scandalizing you? I'm not sure. But it was really this moment where I was like, oh, wow. Like when you listen to someone every day, I guess you I don't know, you have like a relationship with them. So that was the moment for me for sure, where I was like, I actually, and of course, because I'm me, I actually went home and thought maybe I should stop doing this. That was uncomfortable. But because I'm actually an introvert, and like having any sort of recognition is really uncomfortable for me. Um, but yeah, that sorry, that was definitely the moment, because like a number doesn't mean anything to me, but when I've met teachers that have been playing it for like their second grade classroom for 3 years. That is like, I can't even express what an honor that is, that they will let me speak to them. And when I meet parents that turn it on for their children, I mean, sometimes it's just very intimidating to me that I'm like, wow, you're letting me speak directly to your kids every day. And then I'm like, okay, I got to buckle down. I really got to like dedicate myself to this adoration hour and go back to study, because it's just, it is really humbling and a little bit intimidating, that privilege that people have given me for so long. So it's something I'm constantly trying to live up to.
Yeah. What a what a cool experience though. I think that that's so amazing. So how did you get networked with the Augustine Institute, and how did you guys come up with this idea for the Catholic parent?
Sure. So the Getson Institute is awesome. And what you realize is behind these big Catholic institution, they're real people. And so they were honestly like real dads I think both of them were homeschooling families. And so their wives were at home listening to Catholic Sprouts every day. And they have the Amen app, which is a prayer app. So they were kind of looking for kids' content. So they reached out to us for that. But almost immediately in our conversation, they both are from these big families. And, the guy over there was just like, you see all these really glossy images of Catholic families. They're sitting in mass with their hands folded. You know what I mean? And he's like, that is not what my family looks like. And he's like, I bet that's not what your family looks like. I'm like, maybe if you filmed us for 2 hours and took a 1 moment snapshot, but no. And so it was really on their heart to create something that was real. And I don't know, maybe I kind of project hot mess kind of quality, but I guess they saw us as the people to partner with to do that. Which it was such an honor, because I completely agree with them. Like, even if you looked at all the formed content, there's a lot for marriage and there's a lot for kids, but for parents, it's a little bit of a wasteland, you know? And if we read the catechism seriously, that like their faith is dependent on our faith and our ability to lead a domestic church. And if you look at the statistics about like, you know, people actually continuing to practicing their faith into adulthood, it is like 100% on parents. So, they took that seriously. We've taken that seriously. And so we just really found like a partner where we're like, okay, this is a whole, this is a problem that's actually having real time consequences in our church right now. So we need to do something. And we really wanted to create something that any Catholic parent, whether they're married or old or young or single or, empty nesters or expecting their first baby, we wanted something that they could sit down and like see themselves, not like this ideal that I'll get to someday, maybe, but like, oh, yeah, I felt that, that was our hope. So they could feel at home and feel like you're not on this journey on your, it's not all on you. It's not just something that you're going through. We're all we're all wrestling toddlers at mass. I know I
I
am.
think that image right there, like the wrestling toddlers in mass, because it's easy when you're in your pew and you're like stuck in that
Yeah.
battle.
Yeah.
You like look over and you're like, oh, your kid cried like once, I think maybe, but like ours was
Yeah.
like this whole thing. And to be able to just peer into families that obviously are Catholic and practicing the faith and the Augustine Institute chose, and their kids are still crying in a hot mess, you're like, okay, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
there
yeah.
is something there. And I think on the mistakes, one of the mistakes that we would say is having unrealistic expectations
Mhm.
of our children of children in general,
Yes,
of
yes.
what that behavior is supposed to look like, especially when we go into the mass. And yeah, just like loving them where they are. And so I just loved watching somebody else's pew have a tough time. That sounds so terrible, but it was
Oh,
helpful.
it's true. It's true though. So, man, and what was really funny is the videographer that they hired was, super talented, but he does a lot of work in the Catholic world. And so he was saying he's like, I have to like train myself because I film families in mass a lot. But he's like, for other projects, a kid throws a tantrum, a baby starts crying, and you turn the camera off. But he's like, for this, like he would like get up in our face, he's like, zoom in. Or like we had like a family prayer. They were filming his family prayer, and he's like, yeah, usually I'd have them like start over. Maybe let's try it after the baby's nap. But this one, they're like, getting right up in my face while the baby's, smacking me with something. And so it was just funny to even hear like these are people in the industry creating content for Catholic parents, but it's just such a different mindset because like I mean honestly, I love a beautiful Instagram feed as anybody, but it's like there does need to be a balance because if we're only creating like key moment, beautiful moments, then it can really have this false and it can, like you said, it can lead to false expectations. And I know one thing I've learned is like, my boys are not going to behave like my girls. It's actually harder for them to sit still. And we have one particular little squirmy one that we just need to be like, okay, this is really hard for him.
Yeah.
So,
And for parents who have the opposite, we have one little girl who just can't stop bouncing.
yeah.
I just don't like, she just bounces all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
To include mass, to
Hmm.
include dinner,
Mm.
to include all the time. And so, yeah, but they're just kids with certain
There are.
dispositions that she has such a beautiful prayer at times, and then also just she bounces.
She's a
I
kid.
know.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what we've experienced. As you have more kids and as you grow a little bit and you start to figure out some of the expectations, but also just uh, it- is this normal for kids? And when you
Yeah.
didn't grow up Catholic and you don't know when you don't grow up in a Catholic culture, you look around, you're like, I don't know what a Catholic family is supposed to look like. Like, are we doing the thing? Like, are we nailing it? Or is this just an experiment that is a total train wreck? Or maybe both. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well,
um,
and just to speak, so both my husband and I are cradle Catholics, but I will say our generation, I mean, I'm older than y'all, but I mean, our generation, we grew up going to mass, but we did not grow up with a Catholic life at home. I certainly didn't. And so, like maybe we prayed together a little bit, but it wasn't much. And so I feel like we have an entire population of Catholic parents, whether they're converted or cradle Catholics, that honestly feel like they're making it up as they go. And but sometimes I reflect and I'm like, but have Catholic parents ever felt different? Has it ever been different than that? I think we are just by definition of our vocation completely out of our depths. God has entrusted little human beings to us. We're supposed to tell them about God when I am still very much grappling with how to put that into words or my own, chipping away at my own levels of belief or my own virtues and habits. And so, to teach them how to be virtuous when I'm still like totally bankrupt in some areas. So, anyway, I just think like that is the fundamental piece of being a Catholic parent is to be like not qualified. We really aren't. I mean, it's grace. It has to be grace.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
we think like I mean, of course, I grew up in, this like I was a first parent during these blogging years. And I would just, okay, 7 steps to have an orderly home. Let's do it. What are they? Let's do it. Or here's the new routine so that we can like not be bickering all the time. You want to find that key. but everything disappoints. The only thing that doesn't disappoint is Jesus. And as my
Mhm.
spiritual director likes to remind me very often, like, did Jesus ever say it would be easy to follow him? Like, he didn't say,
Mhm.
here's some wheels to put under that cross so it's a little easier to pull. Like, he didn't say that. We shouldn't be confused about the fact that it's going to be hard. So,
Oh, yeah. I love the reality that our absolutes, like, they will always be perfect in mass, like, is such an unrealistic
oh yeah,
expectation. I will always be the best, like, formator for them, like, unrealistic. The only always is Jesus.
Mhm.
He's the only
always.
one that comes in and is able to be that absolute. He is always steadfast and he is always good to us. But I am not. And that's a reality. I think on the mistakes in mass too. I the amount of time that I've wasted angry. Um, there's a line in Searching for and Maintaining Peace by Father Jacques Philippe that God cannot work in an anxious or agitated heart. Um,
Oh
and
wow.
how much of mass I have spent anxious that my kids are not perfect and agitated that they are not behaving. And
Mhm.
therefore, I think often I look at parenting as my responsibility to form them, but there's this reality that they are forming me.
Yeah.
And they are an opportunity for me to really look at the fact that I am struggling with anger and I'm struggling with that anxiousness or that judgment or that condemnation, self and of others, of my children in this particular case. But the like reality that that's not what the Lord is calling me to, and He wants them as they are. He wants me as
Yeah.
I am. We had a beautiful opportunity to just be with the tabernacle with just our kids and this room that doesn't really have furniture, and to let our kids like roll around and like
Mhm.
run in and out of the room and like be kids. And I just sat there and I was like, there is so often when we are with the Lord that I'm telling the kids to put on this act.
Yeah.
And like the Lord doesn't want this perfect act. He just wants our realness. And how much time we waste trying to be perfect when, again, that isn't what the Lord wants from our children, from us. He wants us to be children, all
Yeah.
of us. Um,
Yeah. One thing I love Saint Therese, and
mm,
I love the image, of heaven is her just curled up on God's lap, like a little,
Yeah.
like a little kid just curled up on God's lap, and that, it puts a lot of things into perspective when we're talking about our posture at mass and what we
mhm.
expect from our kids. But man, that is so convicting to hear that God cannot work in an angry or anxious heart. Makes me wonder sometimes how he works at
How,
all.
how
I mean,
does he work with me?
yes. I mean, that's hard, especially when we think about our kids, because it's not only their behavior at mass, but my kids are old enough where, friendship, academics, athletics, like it's so easy to take on the the worrisome parts of their life and almost make them a bigger worry in my life than I am about myself. It's very
Mhm.
easy, you understand the helicopter parent mentality. Like you see it, you don't want to do it, but man, you just love them so hard. It's
Yeah.
so hard not to just enter into that anxious space more than you ever thought you would. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, I think, yeah, if I were to sum up that mistake of just being anxious or agitated with your children and realizing that that doesn't get you anywhere, and the Lord can't work with you in that.
yeah.
But and I think it's tough to, just to it's easy to say that and just be like, well, just give up all of your expectations. Like, who cares? But
Yeah.
like,
That's
well, like, yeah, like
not quite what
we
we're
are
advocating.
actually called to like help our kids grow in
To
virtue and
disciple.
holiness. Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
I think maybe that's like the hard part too, where you, you feel unqualified because you've never raised kids. Like,
Yeah.
congratulations, you're a parent, like every
Yeah.
other parent out there.
Yep, yep.
Um, and just trying to find the balance of like, uh, you know teaching them to grow in virtue, modeling it for them as best as you can, and holding them to standards, but also having the mercy. It's the truth and love piece, where you're always trying to balance that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think as you just have more kids, either the Lord just strips you of your pride or your just your expectations, or
Yeah.
you just start to come around to he just kind of sands off those really rough edges to the point where you're just like, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
You know what? They're like
Yeah.
they love Jesus. It's gonna be
And,
fine.
I mean, I know some people are limited in the number of children they can have through other circumstances,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I sometimes reflect on if we had had 2 and stopped, like, we have 6,
Oh
and who
yeah.
knows if we'll have more, we'll see, but, if we had stopped, it I sometimes, your mind goes to funny places when life's really hard and I'm still carrying a baby, and I'm still changing diapers all these years in, and I'm also navigating middle school, you know what I mean? You just think like, "Man, life would be so much easier if I only had these 2 kids in middle school and I just was done with this." But, but the truth of the matter is, like, I'm not done growing in those service. Like, I still need to go through potty training with at least one more kid because the Lord knows I need to continue to grow in virtue right there. And so I just think the Catholic Church, where we really stress being open to life, even if that is a bigger family than we had anticipated, it is really God's heart, God's plan to stretch us. And
Mhm.
I am not necessarily the type of person that chooses penance. Sometimes God, or often God has to choose those for me.
Yeah.
So those, oh, wow, we're pregnant again. Wow, okay, here we go. So that's been my life. But
Yeah.
but with the Catholic parent, I think the important thing that we really wanted to show, the first episode is about taking kids to mass and why it's hard. And I
Mhm.
think in Catholic kind of online discussions, or, even moms sitting around at the park, we all can agree it's hard. And we can all trade stories about like diaper blowouts, tantrums, whatever. We can all trade stories about that. But I think what is so beautiful about the series is that we acknowledge it's hard. We want you to feel seen, but then there's
Mhm.
a push. But there's
Mhm.
Yeah.
like, it's hard, but you need to go. And it's not
Mhm.
like, oh, but you don't have to go when the baby's really bad or whatever. It's like we can rise to the occasion. And that's what I also
Mhm.
really treasure about the Catholic Church is that, yeah, it's hard, but it's always telling us you can rise to this occasion,
Mhm.
and that also you're not doing it on your own. The Lord will equip you in every situation. And that a mass that you had to dance around in the vestibule the whole time is still a valid mass. You still kept your Sunday obligation and were in the presence of Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
So I just think like that needs to be the complete discussion.
Yeah.
And even like, if you spend time boiling with anger, yeah, let's take a step a little further from that every time. But still, it
Mhm.
was a valid mass. You
Yeah.
participated in the most perfect form of worship that we have as Catholics. You received Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and
Mhm.
divinity in the Eucharist. So like, yep, we're broken, we have room to grow, but look at all the grace.
Yeah. And
Bring
the
forth.
word obligation, that
Mhm.
the Lord is obligating us, that he gave the 10 commandments to the Israelites because he wants to teach us and to grow us, and that it is actually a gift. And so
Yeah.
that this obligation is to help us receive the gift that is available there, to encourage us when it is hard, to rise us up, to go when we are expecting our 5th and it's crazy, and like
Yeah.
life is, it would
Yeah.
be comfortable to just sit home and miss it. It would throw
Yeah.
off our whole week
Would it?
and it'd be awful. But
Yeah.
because again, even though it's an obligation, which I think we have a negative connotation with, that there is a gift that the Lord wants to give us. And I think that actually goes into episode 2 with confession.
Yeah.
I think the biggest mistake parents make is, when, how, never is this going to make it on our schedule? Because it's just hard. Like, we
Mhm.
are going to have to wait in line for over an hour with our kids
Yeah,
tomorrow.
I maybe people can relate to this. We have a parish of it's growing, I mean, exponentially. We have almost 8,000 families, and we
Wow.
have about 2.5 priests.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, like,
The half priest has multiple obligations. So
yeah,
that
yeah,
explains.
he's not half a person, obviously. But um, but yeah, so it's just like, and confession times are limited because our priests are limited, and so you're just like, all right, we gotta. It's it's been a month. Like, buckle up.
Buckle
yeah.
It's
it up.
time to go stand in line for an hour.
Yes.
But I mean,
Yeah.
that harkens so I'm in a different situation. Our parish is small and the confession lines are short. And
Mhm.
so I will say, like, you're living the way that the church has been for over 1,000 years, you know? I mean, my dad would talk about First Friday, the confession lines are out the door, round the corner, you know? Like, how beautiful to see the realization of what this is.
Yeah.
And like, wait, I'm willing to stand in line for an hour if I get to start again, you know?
Yeah.
I get to erase that. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I just think, like,
My
my priest always says, like, you can tell the health of a church by the length of the confession line.
yeah.
Mhm.
Very
Yeah.
important.
We're blessed that there's adoration going on at the same time. So I'll be like,
Mm.
"Well, this was my holy hour for the week,"
Yeah.
because like, oh, and the kids will like come in and out of adoration, which is beautiful. But yeah, the reality though that can be hard when you're
Yeah.
trying to
It is.
schedule and it's bedtime and all of the excuses build up, which I think we're really good
Yeah.
at
Oh, yeah.
allowing those excuses to build up to a point where we're like, well, my son's not that bad, or it's not that big of a deal, or everyone else is
Mhm.
doing something worse, or, like whatever we want to put there. Um, or I'm just ashamed of what I have to say. So I want to avoid
Yeah.
this.
You know, it's so interesting. So we have 3 that have received Holy Communion and, reconciliation, and we'll have a 4th this year. And so, as part of this filming of the Catholic parent was that they came to our house, and they actually talked to our kids, and you kinda like I don't know if you guys are like this, but you feel like all of a sudden you hear someone asking your kid a question, and you're like, well, I've never asked him that. I don't know what he would say. And so
Funny.
they filmed us on the way to confession and they asked my son, like, do you like confession? And our oldest, who's 13, was like, does anybody like confession? And I was like, wow, that actually is like you captured the adult confession experience, like standing in line, looking at your little examination of conscience, going in there. Like it's not my favorite. I don't like it,
Mhm.
And so but I like walking out of the confessional. I like that a
Mhm.
lot. And
Mhm.
so anyways, but it was just funny to be like, "Wow, he's, like, graduated to adult," it's not like, "Ooh, confession, fine. I'm gonna go and talk to the priest," It's like, "I'm a sinner. I have to go say all the things." I'm like, "Well, that's actually the proper disposition before you go to confession." So,
Mhm.
but I mean, the reality that I've experienced is that what is it? 98% of my sins are against my family members,
Mhm.
probably more than half against my husband, and then the others against my children. And so it only makes sense that we would stand in the confession line together so that we can have that experience together and that you're standing outside the confessional while I'm inside telling the priest how I've sinned against you, and then we can go do our penance together. So it just makes a lot of sense
Mhm.
to do it
Yeah.
that way.
Mhm.
And how important it is for our domestic church that we're not letting all this garbage between us build up, but we're
Mhm.
taking care of it.
Yeah. How much better of a parent it
Yeah.
makes me.
Yeah.
Um, how much it helps reset my motherhood and my
Yeah.
compassion and my love and my fortitude to discipline, like
Mm.
all of the
Yeah.
things. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
such an important.
Yeah. My goal when I stand in line for confession is to not add more than 3 sins while I'm physically standing in line.
Man, that's hard when you're standing there
That's
for an hour, especially if you're, like, managing children. Whoo, doggy.
yeah.
We are preparing our first for his first reconciliation, and I asked the family, I was like, "Oh, like, what do you do?" And they were like, "Oh, well, we like clean the house the day of, and then like go to confessions. We like clean the house and then clean our souls." And Drew was like, "Is that like
Oh
the metaphor, or is that because y'all sin in the cleaning process and then you need to go to confession as a family?
Oh,
Or
that's
maybe it
funny.
inspires you to like not sin as much in the house cleaning process.
I don't know.
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
It's a cool metaphor though, and I wouldn't
Yeah,
mind my house
yeah.
cleaned
Yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that would
good.
help too.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So we talked about the Sunday obligation. We talked about confession.
There's so many more
I know.
topics
Yeah.
in
I
this
Yeah.
series.
know.
I
I
wanted to pass it
know.
over to you, Nancy. Are there other ones that you thought about? Let's see. The other episodes are family prayer, sacrifice, generosity, and handing on the faith. So
Yeah.
are there any of those that stand out to you where you're like, man, I wish I had known this when I was a young parent? And so I don't know. I was
I
curious.
guess I guess the one that was kind of the biggest shock to me is I was a high school English teacher in another life. That was my job. And so when I heard, parents are the primary educators, you just have an image in your mind of how things are taught, like a teacher at a chalkboard and children listening, and what I've discovered actually mostly by watching my husband is that teaching within the family looks very different. It's totally different. And like that is never how the faith has really been taught. This whole basically my generation where kids were taken out of the home, sent to CCD, sat in desks with the teacher. It didn't work, because that's not how we teach the faith. And so it's been this, and I think that's like an important thing for parents to realize. It's not like you need to go get a degree in theology so you can go teach your kids. What you need is maybe a saint book and a routine where you sit down with each other at night and read it and then talk about it. Like it's totally different. And the other really liberating thing for me is a realization that the best way to teach my kids is to learn with them. So, like when they have a question, maybe it's a question about a Bible passage or even like a piece of Catholic moral theology, if I don't know the answer, it's not like, "Oh, I'm a failure. Oh, you're gonna lose your faith or something." It's such a cool experience to be like, "Ooh, I don't know. Maybe let's look up a Father Mike Schmidt's video. Maybe let's catch Father after Mass and ask him." Like the acknowledgement of a kid that they have a good question and that you're interested too, and that you're gonna stick with them till you find the answer. Like that is such a powerful faith building moment, way more powerful than if I, was trying to explain some complicated thing I learned and they're sitting there taking notes, So, I really, that was a hard one lesson for me. And it's also like, I mean, you guys have really little kids too. I remember when mine were little, I think like, we're going to learn this concept. So we're going to do a liturgical craft. We're going to take paper plates and glitter and do something fun. Like that's fun. If that's what you want to do, great. But that's not how you have to teach the faith. It can be through a podcast, through a book you read,
Yeah.
through, I mean, a lot of different things, but just doing it together.
Mhm.
So I really hope that, because that's how it always has been. That's how faith has always been taught. And we shouldn't think like, well, I know better than 2,000 years of history. Just to learn it with them.
Yeah. I think that right there, to learn it with them.
Mhm.
I think more than anything, one of the things that inspires me about the Catholic faith is how deep and rich it is, that it will never, I will never get bored, that I can keep digging and keep learning. And there's so much there. And what I want for my children is to have that lifelong thirst and
Yeah.
that lifelong desire to learn. So if I don't have the answer, like that is an example of, guess what? We're lifelong learners on this, and
Yeah.
I'm still learning beside you. And there's always another layer to the Lord. If our God was easily understood and grasped, like if I could get everything right now, he'd be a really boring God.
Yeah, he wouldn't be God.
He
Yeah.
wouldn't be God. Like he would be something I created.
Yeah.
But yeah, just right there, that willingness to learn beside our children, and the fact that that can twice bless, that it blesses our children and it blesses us when we look
Yeah.
at it as an opportunity rather than like, "Ugh, why didn't my parents teach me any of this?" Or like,
Yeah.
"Why wasn't I raised in this way?" Or what where did my formation fail? Like, it's like, no,
Yeah.
like, my children are blessing me as I bless them in this formation.
Mhm.
And what a gift that is. Something else that you said, get a saint book and have a regular time.
Mhm.
I think on one of the mistakes that we have made is this idea that it'll just happen. And it was
Yeah.
happening, but there is something about a routine, like,
Yeah.
we are big advocates for our personal prayer that unless it's scheduled, it's not going to happen. So in the
Mhm.
same way, like unless it's scheduled, that you know when in your day this routine is going to happen, it's not going to happen because
Mhm.
there's going to be another dirty diaper and there's going to be another like X, Y, and
Absolutely.
Z, and all of a sudden it's past bedtime.
Mm.
And also for us, you want to talk about dedicated space?
I was.
Go.
Um, yeah, segue into family prayer.
Yeah.
So, one thing that stuck out to me as you were talking was the intentionality of passing on the faith. I think is really important. Not that it has to look a certain way, but you do have to prioritize it, and
Yeah.
you do have to make space for it, whether that's reading a book or a craft or whatever that looks like in your family. It almost doesn't matter what it looks like, but it does matter that it happens. And so
Mhm.
for us, one thing that one mistake we made that we learned recently is we learned that we needed a space to be able to do family prayer.
Yeah.
And this it doesn't have to be crazy. Our we did a video on this and we showed a picture. It's a cross and a rug in a corner.
Yeah.
Like, this, don't overthink this one. But but before, again, we were just kind of like, yeah, like we kind of do some
Be on the
prayers throughout the day,
couch.
and then, but like sometimes we'd get tired, or a lot of times we would get tired, and then we wouldn't do it with the family. But now it's part of our routine, and there's a place for it where we go, and the kids are a hot mess. They're rolling around on the ground. It's
Yes.
like,
We took
but
the furniture away because it was too big of
yeah,
an issue.
yeah, they lost their chair
Yeah.
privileges because that was a fight.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, but that is our prayer corner, and that is our space that we're able to go as a family, and it's part of our routine.
Yeah. So my husband is the champion of our prayer space. He's like just he's much more spatial than I am. So we have a a beautiful little nook where we sit and kids fight about where they're going to sit every single night and people get injured with rosaries regularly. But yes, it's and we're constantly kind of adding and we have a place where we keep track of our petitions there too and the Bible, we open the word every night. But what's so cool is with Catholic Sprouts, we have a kind of big community. And at one point, we asked people to share their prayer spaces with us. So we saw lots of pictures. And what's so fun is, you see all sorts of different things. Some people have a whole chapel, but there were people that lived in really small places like New York City, tiny apartment, but they still would be like, okay, but this shelf of the bookshelf is our prayer space. They had a beautiful little cloth and icons and stuff, or somebody, it was a window ledge that they use as their prayer altar. And then someone else, it was like, just a coffee table, like, okay, this half of the room is all entertainment, but but this coffee table, this space is our altar. And so it was just really, of course there's other people that is like, this is our prayer, you know basement, or
Yeah.
something, big. But I just was so inspired by people in very small places that were like, yep, but this is the sacred place where we gather and pray. And I just think it's so important that you have that place. And I think it's especially important when you have kids because you just need a place that's like, all the noisy toys are not here, all the craft supplies are not here. Like, this is there you can, and we have things like, we have our religious board books and picture books, so the antsy ones can play with, and we have more of those little poppet rosaries than you could imagine, so the fidgety ones are playing for sure, and we kind of expect the older ones to transition out of those things. But yeah, I just think it's important. And for kids, there's no discussion anymore. Like, okay, they still whine for sure, but no one's surprised when 8 o'clock at night we gather for prayer. Like no one's like, what? Wait, what? We're doing that tonight? Like, no, well, we've been doing this for years. Oh, they complain. Like, don't get me wrong. It's not like our halos appear and we levitate. That's definitely not what happens. And my husband and I still lose our temper regularly. And, a lot of times our family prayer ends with an apology. So, but you keep doing it,
Yeah.
like, yeah, because
Still
like
counts.
that's what the catechism tells us, right? We learn to love because of our opportunities to forgive in the family. And there's no lack of those. But it's such a blessing. I think a lot. I got married a little bit older. I was almost 30 when I got married, which at the time I thought I was like ancient. But you just realize how marriage and family, you think you're going to get so much, and you do, but you give so much, you're changed, you're stretched. And so, man, it's such a journey. I would not be here without these people
Mhm.
stretching me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that goes into the sacrifice
I was
episode.
just thinking
Highly
that.
recommend. Highly recommend. Also loved Lauren's testimony.
Oh,
There's a
yeah.
single mom
Man, yeah.
Yes,
and
yes.
just
Good.
beautifully shares the hardship of that.
I really want to stress too, like if your family looks different, it doesn't mean that you aren't doing the work of a Catholic parent or leading a domestic church. Single parents, divorced parents, people are, raising a different generation of children, grandparents doing that work. Like you're still doing the work, very important holy work, caring for souls. So I do think the church is getting better, but we do need to make sure that we serve those people, recognize them too.
Yeah.
So I was so proud of Lauren that she was willing to share those things. That's hard.
It's
Oh
hard.
my goodness. Yeah.
Mhm.
Very.
Yeah. And I think on top of that, for just the sacrifice, like I think one mistake we've made is it's so easy to think that um, missionary work is like out there. It's the people serving in Africa, and it's the big time Catholic speakers, and it's just like, well, like they're all like making a difference in the world, and I'm just here changing
Yeah.
diapers.
Called
Yeah.
to do something
Yeah,
extraordinary.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and do you want to tell a story about the tabernacle real quick?
I So we have the opportunity around Christmas time to spend time in a house that has a tabernacle. And I was sitting there, this is 2 years ago, I think, and Drew and I was just like, I've grown a lot in like not wanting the religious vocation, like not envying it or coveting it. But there's one thing that I would really still like, a tabernacle in my house. Like, this is so beautiful and
Yeah.
wonderful and,
Yeah.
like, such a gift and, like, and Drew very, quickly turns to me and goes, "You have 5 tabernacles in your house." I was just like, "Oh, if only I looked at my children and my
Yes.
husband in that way all the time."
Mhm.
And the gift that it is. Like, parents, you are doing heroic work. And when
Yeah.
Drew mentions, like, we see this great mission out here, like, you are doing extraordinary things in raising disciples in the next generation, in passing on the faith. And it is hard, but
Mhm.
it is extraordinary. And you get to care for these tabernacles, these
Yeah.
souls, these reflections of Christ, and that matters.
Mhm.
And your sacrifice, your life-giving love to them is so important. Um, you're not alone in that. You are doing something that matters to the Lord. I think in our society, men need to hear that this
Yeah.
role in family life. But I also think for women, as we like go out and try our careers, like we're looking for purpose. And yet, like when it seasons or at times we are called home, this is a worthy purpose.
Yeah.
This is a worthy mission. This is a worthy gift of our time.
Yeah. I completely agree.
Yeah.
My one of my younger sisters is a nun, a fully professed nun, and they go to prayer various times a day. And one of the times that they get up is right in the middle of the night, and I was sitting there with her. Well, the foundress of her order was explaining it. And she was like, we get up in the middle of the night to adore Jesus as a mother gets out of bed to go tend to her children. And she was just talking about, we want to have that joy of getting up to tend to our beloved. And I was sitting there and I'm like, oh my, that's not how I roll out of bed at 2 in the morning. I'm like, what? Who's up? What's going on?
A really
I mean,
struggle busting.
yeah. So it was like this really like, oh, okay. I mean, I just think that's one of the other beautiful things is like the religious are pulling from our vocation to understand how to love well, and that we can pull from their vocation to learn how to love well. And it was like, that was such a moment for me. It was several years ago, but I try to remember, like, it's like my beloved is calling to me,
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to remind
but
us of that tonight.
The beloved is
yes, my
calling.
beloved
Yes.
is calling. Yes, and
Yeah.
just as they went to the tabernacle to
Yeah.
worship, we go to
Mhm.
our little tabernacles to offer love.
Yeah.
And and both are like it's a sacrifice for anybody to get up out of bed always. And just that like that is a true act of love.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, Drew will often remind me, like, "That was your holy hour?" Like,
yeah. There's your vigil.
"Welcome to your vigil. Welcome to your holy hour." Like, "You've already prayed 1 holy hour today." So, like, you're already ahead of the,
Yeah.
Pretty
like,
much nailing it.
pretty much nailing it. It's gonna be okay that you slept in and missed mass, but, like a daily mass,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
caveat, but yes.
Yeah. I just looked at the time, which is crazy
Oh,
because
wow.
I know this has been so good.
This has
Okay.
been so good.
Nancy, any other mistakes that you've made you would love to tell people, or even
Oh
just
my.
things that you would love to tell parents out there before we get to the lightning round?
Oh my.
Yeah.
Let me think. So I will say the most challenging one for us to film was the one on tithing, which I think is kind of like
Mm.
the generosity topic. I just think it's a particular difficulty to tithe as parents just because we have so many people dependent upon us and the future. My husband and I can both be like, what if that happens? What if that happens? What if someone gets sick? What if? And then you can kind of talk yourself out of being generous as a parent in a particular way. So I just want to acknowledge that that's hard for parents. But again, there's no little asterisk that says, unless you're a parent, then you don't have to tithe. So, um, anyway, I just pray that when you watch that one, you have an open heart and you realize that we're right there. It's painful for everybody. We're struggling too. So anyway,
Mhm.
but yeah,
Yeah.
but they're all good. And what I'm so grateful for with the Catholic parent is that there were all of these parents willing to talk honestly, willing to let people into their kitchens and their prayer spaces and watch them in mass. So that's intimidating. So I just hope that the right people see it and that they see themselves and accept the challenge.
Absolutely. Oh, tithing. Yes. The Lord is never outdone in generosity. When we are
Oh,
generous to Him, He is generous to us. And I think
mhm.
also we've learned that other ways that we are called to generosity, yes, tithing absolutely first, but then hosting and inviting people into our lives and into our mess.
Uh,
And so allowing your vocation to be a place where you tithe also through a dinner, of feeding another family, of offering the baby meals, of offering the just space to welcome and to love on people,
mhm.
would be a challenge in this two families.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
okay, we could talk forever. I could go into each one of these episodes for like another hour. I think each one of
Yeah.
these could have been an hour long conversation
I
with
know,
you.
they're
Thank
big.
you so
Yeah.
much. Thank
Yeah.
you. And yes, the
The
series.
joy.
The series is definitely, if you enjoyed this conversation, yeah, I couldn't recommend it enough. I also, we can do lightning, but I definitely recommend Catholic Sprouts. We have done Sacred Heart devotional, your
Oh,
preparations
good.
for Advent, for Easter, um, the Kids Saint Club. I said that wrong.
Oh, that's cool.
But
That's
like all
great.
of these resources have been such a blessing to our family. And so I highly, highly recommend Catholic Sprouts.
I'm
All
so
right.
honored.
Lightning round.
Lightning round. Okay. From the woman who's done like 8 billion saint podcasts, who
Ooh,
is your
my.
favorite saint?
Oh my. Well, it changes regularly. So I'm actually huge. The Lord is tugging on me in terms of the Sacred Heart, most definitely. And so I will say at the moment it is Saint Gertrude the Great, who had some really vivid visions of the Sacred Heart, like one where Jesus asked her to lay her head on his chest and hear his heart beat. And anyways, that's just something
Mm.
Mhm.
I feel myself reliving through her. So yeah, ask me a different day. I'll give you a different saint. But today, Saint Gertrude the Great. I love her.
So today, what is your favorite devotion?
Oh, well, it has to be the rosary. Yeah. So, when was it? 2017. Was that 6 years ago now? Gosh, where am I? What day is it? Almost, yeah, 6.5 years ago. We had a stillborn loss. We lost the baby at 22 weeks. And so yeah, it's the whole thing, the whole physical and emotional experience. But anyway, I was reading a biography of St. Maximilian Kolbe at the time when that baby died. We named him Maximilian, and I felt I had a very powerful Marian experience during the delivery of that baby. And since then, I prayed a rosary every single day. And it's to the point where, I mean, if I don't pray the rosary, I feel a tremendous spiritual attack. I just think uh, if you aren't in the habit of praying a daily rosary, you don't realize like the protection that you can have through it. And it's something I don't want to say like I'm afraid not to pray it every day, but like I need it. I need it, you know? And to me, everything else is sort of ancillary extra. It's always the rosary to me. So
What a gift.
That's so good. Okay. Favorite book recommendation. Is there a book that you're just like handing out left and right, or you find that you're always like, you should read this book?
okay, this is totally random, but the biography of Saint Charles or Blessed Charles of Austria. Have you ever read his biography?
We have
Oh
not.
man, he's awesome. Oh, he's so good. So he's a blessed. He was the last emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I don't know. Anyway, I just gave that to my dad. So I guess that's top of my mind. I love biographies. I love like really in depth. So, but there's a lot of them. I'm also reading The Art of Living by Edward Shree right now, which is definitely challenging me.
Mm.
Gosh, when you really look at what virtue is and where you are, you're just like, oh no. But I'm choosing the right thing, but that's not enough. Oh no. So, anyways, that's definitely challenging me right now.
Yes, yes. And last, where can people learn more about you, what you have going on? Yeah,
And the Catholic Parent.
yeah, on the Catholic Parent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Catholic Parent is on Formed. You should definitely go check it out. And if you don't know what Formed is basically Netflix for Catholic content. There is a high probability that your parish has a subscription. And so you should ask them, get the code, go watch the Catholic Parent. I hope you enjoy it and you find yourself in it. If you want to connect with me, you can find me at Catholic Sprouts anywhere, CatholicSprouts.com. Our podcast is called Catholic Sprouts. We would love for you to come and listen. And yeah, we offer all sorts of stuff, but start with the podcast. If you like that, we can talk later.
We will leave links for all of that down below in the description. Nancy, thank you. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for blessing our family and for all the families that you bless. For our viewers, know that we are all praying for you
Thank
in
you.
this beautiful struggle of parenthood as well.
Yes.
And then, yes, thank you.
And thank you guys. It's so nice to talk to a married couple. I tried to do a podcast with my husband for a while. It's not easy. So good job. This is like a true testament to marriage. Beautiful. Keep it up.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Until next time, God bless.